the master of his eunuchs, we have old horse face here, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed, and of the princes. In other words, we're going to pick out certain people of Judah and that were in Jerusalem that have been captured here. Verse 4, children in whom was no blemish, but well favored, and skillful in all wisdom, and cunning in knowledge, and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans, which, again, the language at that time for Babylon was Chaldee. But again, here you have the king, Nebuchadnezzar, wanting the best of the best, so to speak. Those who had no blemish, those skillful in all wisdom, understanding science, and etc., to be teachers in his kingdom. And again, I want to bring this to the future, to the present and to the future, if we may. And again, Nebuchadnezzar being a type for Antichrist, when Satan comes on the scene as Antichrist, there's going to be certain people that he looks for, and that he instructs his children and his helpers, both his children in this age right now and the fallen angels who will come to him, or come with him, that he's going to have his favored people that he wants to get over to his side as well. Do you know by chance who those people might be? Well, when he comes to this earth age, or when he comes in this earth age as Antichrist, as instead of Christ, pretending to be Christ even, most of the world is going to believe that he is exactly that. Even, sadly, many Christians, even sadly, most Christians. But when that happens, he will have most of the world on his side already. So then, who does he really want on his side? Who does he want to convert to his little church when that time comes? Those who know that he's a fake. Those who know that he's Antichrist. Those that know that he's an abomination. Again, he'll have everybody else. Doesn't necessarily mean they're bound for hell. But he will have them deceived. He will have them believing that he is, again, Messiah. And so his big challenge, his big goal, will be to go after those who have wisdom and understanding from this world, and those who are well favored because of it in God's eyes. That's who he's going to be trying to convert into his little kingdom. And suffice it to say that I don't think he'll be very successful. In fact, hopefully not successful at all, because we're talking about God's elect who know who he is, and will want nothing to do with him. But nevertheless, that's who he wants, because again, during that time, he's going to have everybody else in the world on his side and eating out of his hand. But just as Nebuchadnezzar wanted certain children from Judah who could be useful to his kingdom, so too will Satan want the best and the brightest, spiritually speaking, to try to convert them to his kingdom. Again, more than likely not going to happen, but he'll certainly try. Verse 5, and the king, this of course being Nebuchadnezzar, appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat, and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. And again, so he has his diet, but again, I want to look at this from a spiritual future perspective. Now, during this time of Daniel, and during this time of the captivity, the king, Nebuchadnezzar, had an appointed diet. We're going to find that Daniel and his 3 allies, if you will, that commonly are called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, which is actually their Babylonian or their Chaldee names and not their Hebrew names. But we're going to find that Daniel is going to refuse to partake of this diet, and we'll get into why later on in this chapter and in this show. But again, think of this spiritually, and think of this as Nebuchadnezzar, a type for Antichrist. And what is the spiritual food that is being offered, or that will be offered? Let me back up a little bit. What is the spiritual food that a Christian should partake of, and that a Christian should feed off of and take into their spiritual body, into their soul, into their mind? What is it spiritually that nourishes a Christian, or quite frankly, any person? It's truth from this Word of God. Real, spiritual, meaty truth. And so what you're going to have when Satan comes as Antichrist, with his little diet, with his spiritual food, is you're going to have a bunch of junk. You're going to have food that doesn't nourish a body one bit spiritually. If anything, it poisons and toxifies a spiritual body and a soul, so that not only is there no nourishment from it, but that even it would lead to the death of that soul potentially. And certainly anyone who would be deceived by him would be, at that time, would be spiritually dead. Again, doesn't mean that they are going to hell, because we'll have a millennium coming up in which many will be disciplined and in which many will be taught the right way rather than the wrong way. But, again, he's going to come with his food, that's God's election, and that those who know better also want to reject and have no part of. And, I can't help but think, when I think of this whole idea of spiritual food and spiritual starvation at this time, and this is going to be a little bit of a digression, but I'm going to go ahead and go there. I want to go to Isaiah chapter 29, and we'll go quickly here. Isaiah chapter 29. Woe to Ariel, this verse 1. Woe to Ariel, the city where David dwelt. Add ye year to year, let them kill sacrifices. And we're speaking of Jerusalem, because that ultimately is where David would dwell. Verse 2, Yet I will distress Ariel, Jerusalem, and there shall be heaviness and sorrow, and it shall be unto me as Ariel. Now, why would there be heaviness and sorrow in Jerusalem at this particular time, or at that particular time? Because of who's sitting there, claiming to be God, claiming to be Christ, that is nothing but an abomination, and Satan himself as Antichrist. That's where the distress and the heaviness and sorrow comes from. Verse 3, And I will camp against thee round about, and will lay siege against thee with a mount, and I will lay forts against thee. Again, even saying that these armies that come around and encamp around Jerusalem at that particular time, which when that happens, friend, you can pretty much look for the end. You can pretty much look for the return of Christ pretty much right around the corner. The true Christ now, not the fake. But that God's saying that he will bring these armies against Jerusalem. And it's a battle that will be fought, that will end rather quickly. And but God allows it to come to pass. God even brings it about. Verse 4, And thou shalt be brought down, and shalt speak out of the ground, and thy speech shall be low out of the dust, and thy voice shall be as one that hath a familiar spirit. You don't want to have anything to do with familiar spirits, though. But again, that's spiritually what we're getting into at that time. In God's city, in Jerusalem, out of the ground, and thy speech shall whisper out of the dust. And we know from Genesis, by the way, that the one who's sentenced to crawl in the dust, figure of speech, but a sense of degradation is Satan himself. Verse 5, Moreover, the multitude of thy strangers shall be like small dust, and the multitude of the terrible ones shall be as chaff that passeth away, yes, it shall be at an instant suddenly. Yea, it shall be as an instant suddenly. Again, it's going to be over just like that. Verse 6, Then thou shalt be visited of the Lord of hosts with thunder and with earthquake, and great noise with storm and tempest, and the flame of devouring fire. That sounds pretty rough, doesn't it? Only against his enemies. Only against those that go against him. Not against those who love him. Verse 6, 7, And the multitude of all the nations that fight against Ariel, even all that fight against her and her munition, and that distress her, shall be as a dream of a night vision. Verse 8, the real reason I came here. It shall even be as when an hungry man dreameth, and behold, he eateth, but he awaketh, and his soul is empty. There's no nourishment there. You know, he thought he was filled, and he's still starving. Or as when a thirsty man dreameth, and behold, he drinketh, but he awaketh, and behold, he is faint. Again, nothing that actually satisfied his soul. And his soul hath appetite, so shall the multitude of all the nations be that fight against Mount Zion. And again, that's basically the state of affairs, spiritually speaking, that partake of the Antichrist diet during that time. That they will eat and eat and eat, and yet never be satisfied, and never be filled. And, again, I could even bring in Hebrews chapter 6, verses 4 through 6, where basically you've got to give people meat at some point. Spiritual meat. When a person is first saved, they can subsist on the milk from the Lord, but eventually they need meat, and they need to be given truth and deeper truth and more truth, and learn how to discern and divide truth in this world for themselves, or they will starve to death, spiritually speaking, even though they may eat and eat and eat. And sadly, you've got a lot of Christians in churches that mean well, but that don't feed their flocks, that don't feed the people in those pews spiritual meat, who are starving to death. Sadly, just like to be taken even by Antichrist when he shows up. But anyway, we have Nebuchadnezzar back in Daniel, who had appointed this diet. Verse 6, Now among these were the children of Judah. And I want to make sure I don't miss anything I wanted to hit. Not really. Certainly when you talk about wine in verse 5, there's a wine that Antichrist will have too, and you have a harlot that is drunken off of that wine, which will basically be, unfortunately, again, many of the churches in that one world religious system that thinks everything is so beautiful and so spiritual and is incredibly deceived. But verse 6, Now among these were the children of Judah, Daniel, which is again to say God is judge, Hananiah, God is gracious, Mishael, who is as God, and Azariah, God is help. The meaning of their Hebrew names. Verse 7, Unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names, for he gave unto Daniel the name of Belteshazzar, which means, O Bel, protect his life, and to Hananiah of Shadrach, meaning command of Aku, the moon god, and to Mishael of Meshach, who is as Aku, and again Mishael, his name meaning who is as God. The prince of the eunuchs here changed it to who is as Aku, this moon god, and to Azariah of Abednego meaning servant or worshiper of Nego. So their names were changed, and ironically enough, we kind of refer to them as these Babylonian names, No big deal necessarily, but that was not